let's graph this equation, and they want us to complete the square in order to do it. So if you could, teacher just said graph it, you could always just punch in your calculator or find x-intercepts using quadratic formula and find the y-intercept, which is right there, and plot them. That would find the vertex by you doing negative b over 2a. There's lots of ways you can do this, but they want us to do it this way. I would definitely not recommend this normally, but since they're asking us to do it, we're going to do it. We're going to complete the square. A little bit trickier because this is not 1 and this is not even, and they're both fractions. So same process though. We're going to factor out, we're going to take these two terms and factor this out of it. So take the 2/3 out, leave lots of space. There's your -1 left over there. Taking the 2/3 out is going to just leave x squared there. Taking 2/3 out of 4/3 is going to give you 2/3. No, that's not right. It's going to give you 2. It's going to give you 2x, which actually does make this quite a bit easier now, because taking a 2/3 out of there left you with an even linear coefficient. Now you're going to add something here, and you're going to subtract 2/3 of that same something out here. Because when I'm adding, really I'm adding 2/3 of whatever number I put there, and therefore I have to balance my equation by subtracting 2/3 of that same number. What's that number? It's half of 2 squared, which is just 1, and there's 1. So your equation, really, this wasn't as hard as it looked at first. It's just x plus 1 squared minus 1 2/3. I'll leave it like that as a mixed number because it's easier to graph, because that's what we're going to do now. We're going to find our vertex. Our vertex is -1, the opposite of that, comma, -1 2/3. So your vertex is -1, -1 2/3, which is about here. So there's your vertex. Since it's a leading coefficient, the x squared coefficient is, since it's a positive leading coefficient, it's opening up. We're going to see that soon because they want us to find the x-intercepts, y-intercepts, all that kind of stuff. Well, there's your y-intercept. It's just -1, so that makes sense. There's -1. And so you can tell that, sure, it's going to cross the x-axis twice. So what values are those? Well, set this equal to 0 to find those values. So setting that equal to 0, now I do want to turn that into a mixed number, so that's 5/3. So I'm going to multiply everything by 3 first, because I'm clearing the fraction. This is just another one of those little tricks that makes this problem so much easier. If I multiply this whole thing by 3, I will get still 0. This 3 and that 3 will cancel, and you get 2. You don't have to multiply it inside there because it's being multiplied already. And this 3 and that 3 will cancel, and you get -5. Now it's much easier to solve this. Add 5 to both sides, divide by 2, take the square root, and subtract 1. There are your two solutions, which makes sense. Here's negative. There's -1 right there. That's your axis of symmetry. I'm adding and subtracting square root of 5/2. So adding and subtracting square root of 5/2, adding it will put me about there. Subtracting will put me symmetrically on this side, and there's your graph. Again, roughly graphing, but that works. So that point, if they want, if they want you to label it, is -1 plus the square root of 5/2. That's what that point is. That point is -1 minus the square root of 5/2. That point down there is -1, comma, -5/3, or -1 2/3. That's your vertex. And of course that is 0, -1.